everyone. Welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast, the go-to platform for insights on business, strategy, and success. Today, we have a very special treat for our listeners. With us is Dave Wakeman, a global business advisor and consultant who has reshaped the strategic landscape for businesses across continents. His work, which spans from creating and capturing profitable business opportunities to penning the influential weekly strategy newsletter, The Business of Value, has garnered recognition worldwide. Whether you're an executive, a budding entrepreneur, or just curious about the world of business, this episode promises to deliver invaluable insights. Let's dive right in. Hi, Dave. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Very pleased to have you with us this morning.
I really have to live up to to that introduction you gave me. That was amazing. Thank you.
Well, I'm so pleased for you to join with us today. Now, Dave, it's very fascinating to understand the intricacies of spotting and seizing new opportunities.
Sure.
Can you let our audience know, how do you define a successful business strategy in today's dynamic environment? And can you walk us through your process when helping businesses identify and create new opportunities?
Sure. So we'll start with the idea of how do you identify an opportunity? And there is the way I teach people is to think about opportunity as two sides. Like you have to look at it with two sets of eyes. One side's the analyst, and the analyst is married to data, right? They want to know all the market research. They want to talk to the customers. They want to do focus groups. They want to do all that stuff, and it's great. The problem is that with data, you're looking backwards. And that's reactive. So then on the other hand, with the other eye, you have to be proactive. And that's the eye of the architect, because the architect takes all of these laws that are immutable and he or she shapes them into something that's new and creative and different. So the way I teach people strategy is it's about knowing the past, understanding what customers value and what they want and need, but not being afraid of the future, and understanding that the future is probably not going to look like the past, and being able to make choices about what you will do, but more importantly, what you won't do, so that you can create that future. Whether it's profitability, it's new market growth, it's sustaining your place in the market, it's refreshing your brand. It's all about making these decisions. And ultimately, strategy is about choice. And the way I talk to people about choice, I like to talk to them about making sure that they're making choices about things they won't do, because the world today, the environment can overwhelm you with I think you probably hear this all the time. Everybody's doing this, everybody's doing that. And I try to tell people that it's very important that you focus on what is you should do, not what everybody else should do. So that's about creating and capturing opportunities. It begins with you and understanding value and what you want the future to look like. Now, the second part of your question was about, if you repeat it for me, because I got tied up in my other.
Now, you mentioned it beautifully. People are overwhelmed and you should focus on you and what you can do best.
Yes.
But my second half of the question was, can you walk us through your process when helping
Yes.
businesses identify and create new opportunities?
I got so excited by the analyst and the architect because it's like so clear for people that I forgot about the process. And the process is pretty simple, because most of the time people fail at strategy, or they fail to put a strategy in place because it seems too complex for them. So I like to focus people on 5 quick actions. The first thing is, you got to know what success looks like. And so every project, every workshop, every engagement starts with one question. Help me understand what success looks like to you. What are you going to define as success? Because if you don't know what success looks like, I think it's Lewis Carroll said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. It's the same thing with strategy. So you have to define what success will look like to begin with. The second part is you have to identify who the customer is, right? I think probably if I say this, a lot of the listeners are going to be like, whoa, Dave, you're hitting too close to home. And I'm going to do it anyway. But everybody is not your customer. So you have to understand who your customer really is. There's a lot of talk about buying committees. There is a lot of talk about, we can be for everybody. It's not true. It's not always true. You have to be very specific about who your customer is. I came up in marketing, so I have a really, really strong background in market research and targeting. And And targeting is like really about choice. It's about picking who you're going to focus on. And what happens a lot of times when people are working on targeting, they're afraid they're leaving people behind. You have to be for somebody and not for everybody. But it's not necessarily like you're saying I'm not going to work with these people, because there's significant overlap, but you do have to make a choice. So the third part of the process is about the positioning and the value proposition. And really the question I ask people is, why you? Why should they pick you over any of the other alternatives that they're going to have access to? And the biggest issue that most people are dealing with when it comes to making that choice about why people should pick you is the status quo, is their largest competition, right? The potential customer doesn't feel enough pain to change the way they're doing things. And you have to fight that. You have to like figure out a way to make the pain of not changing seem so great that people take action. I mean, that's like your biggest barrier. From there, I want to make sure you have the resources that you need to be successful, because a lot of times people come up with these grand plans, these big ambitions, but if they don't put the resources behind them, can't be successful, right? You need to really be careful about not trying to do too much with too little, because that almost can guarantee that you're going to fail. And then the final step is we set out some action steps, because again, a good strategy with no action behind it is not going to work.
Right. Now, great 5 steps, but Dave, help us understand, balancing between growth and stability is such a perpetual challenge for
Mm-hmm.
businesses, I mean, you worked with various organizations and, I believe our audience and myself are very eager to hear your insights on this. How do businesses strike a balance between pursuing new opportunities and consolidating their current strengths?
Okay. So that's a really great question. And you threw in strengths there at the end. So that gives me a good opportunity
Right.
to go back to the 5 ideas we talked about before. Every every business I've ever encountered, they do some things better than they do others, right? And so there's this kind of belief that they can just sustain that. The thing is nothing stands still, right? We're always either growing or falling back. Like the equilibrium of sustainability is very, very short, right? So we're always either like, holding on for dear life to like not lose what we had, or we're trying to progress. So when I talk about growth with people, I like to highlight that idea, right? Which is that you might be number one in your market now. You might be number two in your market right now, or you might have a nice book of business. But if you continue to do the same things over and over again, pretty soon that competitive advantage you have is going to erode, is going to go away. So growth has two sides to it, to me, right? There's the constant need to grow and renew your business to make sure it's current and relevant and still meets the demands of your customers, because your customers are changing just like you. But there's also the growth of like reaching new markets and creating new opportunities. So what I try to explain to people is that you have to be clear. I talk a lot about controlling the language when I'm teaching my brand management class or if I'm working with clients, because if you aren't clear about the definition of which one you're trying to achieve, it'll confuse your actions and it'll make it much more difficult for you to be successful. So are you growing in the way that you deliver value to your current customers because you got a nice book of business? You're not looking to, scale's the term people want to use. Or are you looking to grow in a way that makes the business more scalable? You're reaching a larger audience. You're selling to more people. And the difference, that difference matters because it's two different conversations. So like that's how I deal with people with stability, because that one form of growth is about stability and maintaining your market share. The other part is about growing and entering new markets.
You've nailed it with that response,
I
Dave.
try.
But
I try.
but Dave, competition is so fierce, and standing
It
out is
is.
so paramount. You are an expert in creative differentiation. Now, Dave, in a world saturated with brands vying for attention, what are some innovative ways businesses can differentiate themselves and stay ahead of the curve?
Okay, so how can businesses differentiate themselves and stay ahead of the curve? So, the number one issue that most brands have is not well, differentiation is a big issue. The number one challenge, though, most businesses are trying to overcome is the fact that nobody knows they exist, right? It's just lack of awareness. So, the first step in differentiating yourself is making sure people are aware of you, right? Because if they don't, your differentiation, all of this stuff doesn't matter if people don't know you exist. So that's the first problem. The second step here, as far as standing out against the competition and differentiating yourself, is understanding what makes you different. And it may not seem important to you, but it might be important to the customer. And the way I teach people about thinking like this is about the classic marketing business school 3 C's of the customer, competition, and or company and competition. So what does the customer want that my company can give them that's better than that we deliver better than the competition? You have to have some reason for people to pick you over the alternatives. And it's important because if you are just lumped into a box with, like, take me, for example, a strategy and branding consultant, with every other strategy and branding consultant in the world, then I'm a commodity, right? And if you don't have a strong value proposition and a understanding of why people should pick you over someone else, then you become a commodity. And one of the real big things that I try to impress upon people is that there's 2 forms of value that they really always need to consider. And that's the tangible value. Those are like profits, time saved, all of those things. And the intangible, which is just as important, if maybe not more so, because a lot of times we have this myth that, because it's business, everything's rational. I think that business people, when they're making these decisions, are more irrational than anybody. But that's a different podcast. But the irrational stuff, like less stress, right? Easier life at home because you're not so stressed out from work, less time managing disputes. All of these things, intangibles, are just as valuable. So think about both sides of the equation when you're figuring out why people should pick you, because there has to be a reason. Even if it maybe doesn't seem as important to you, it might be tremendously important to the customer, and you want to highlight that because that will be a reason for them to pick you over the alternatives or the biggest competitor, the status quo.
No, you're 100% right. Communicating value to customers is a very crucial aspect of business.
Mhm.
Now, Dave, in your newsletter, The Business of
Yeah.
Value, you often discuss value perception.
Yes.
How can businesses effectively communicate the value of their offering to justify their pricing?
So pricing and value perception are really, really wed. A equation that I will teach everybody here today that I think hopefully will help them is that your price equals your perceived value. And if you don't have a high perceived value, you're not going to get a high price. So how do you manage that perception? Number one is you want to make sure you're focusing on the right people. You could have the greatest message in the world, and if it's not talking to the right person, it won't matter. It'll be irrelevant to them. The second thing is you're going to need to remember that value proposition. You're going to want to have that differentiation laid out for people. The reason they're picking you over the alternatives, why you're better than other places. The third thing is you're going to have to show up consistently. These messages of differentiation, of value, of perception, they don't happen in a vacuum. They don't happen immediately. Some of our strongest brands are that strong because they've shown up with similar messages consistently over time, over and over and over again. And you want to make sure you can back it up, because if you make a promise that you can't keep, then you have no credibility in the market. And eventually it might not hurt you the first time, but eventually it will. And probably if you're listening to this podcast and you're an SME, you can't afford to fix that perception if you screw up, because you won't have the same budget that a larger company will.
Now, it's quite impressive, Dave, how your expertise transcends borders. I mean, your
Yeah.
writing has been translated into multiple languages and your insights are sought globally. Now, I'm very curious, and I'm sure our audiences as well. Are there certain business principles or strategies that you find resonate universally?
Yes. So, and that's where my process came from. Everybody needs to understand the idea of what success looks like. I talk about success and like defining what success looks like for people all the time. And the first time people hear that "what does success look like" question, you can almost see a light bulb go off in their heads. And I think that happens because strategy is one of those terms like branding and marketing that have been used so indiscriminately over time that they become meaningless in a way. So when you have somebody who's comes in and starts talking about strategy, and the first thing they talk about is like, well, what does success look like? It changes the perception, because then strategy is not this thing that like is thrown around. It's like, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, if you're not making a strategy that is focused on helping you win in your market to create a bigger business, a better business, a more profitable business, then we're wasting our time here, right? And so that's, the first is like just understanding the connection between success and strategy. That's one universal. The second key principle to strategy around the globe is that understanding of value. Right. And one of the big challenges that people seem to struggle with, no matter where I go, is really kind of tying the connection between tangible and intangible value together in a way that it helps them understand that both of them create that competitive advantage. And that seems to be a consistent challenge. And then the third thing is the importance of brand. And I think it goes back to the first part of this answer to this question, which was like strategy has been so undermined because people use the term so indiscriminately and with such lack of care. It's the same with brand. The way I teach people about branding and strategy is that there is a corporate level strategy. In my opinion, that's largely become a planning process. So the strategy that comes to your market really happens through your ability to identify who the customer is, why they're picking you. And that's kind of where strategy and branding have come together.
You've tied it up so nicely, Dave. But looking ahead is essential in this ever
Yeah,
evolving world of business.
yeah,
And given your vast experience and
sure.
observations, where do you see the world of business heading in the next decade? And what strategies should businesses adopt to stay relevant and profitable?
All right. So you're in Canada and I'm in the US. And so the laws and the business climate is much different.
Right.
But what I do know is that the American business climate, it kind of seeps into around the globe. So one thing that's going on right now is there's a big antitrust case against Google happening in the U.S., and that case is about competition.
Right.
That follows on the heels of there's a investigation going on or being planned by the Department of Justice or one of the federal regulators into Live Nation and Ticketmaster and potential monopoly there. There's all kinds of talk about competition, potentially breaking up big conglomerate firms, and I'm excited for it. And let me tell you why. So you don't believe me, but I've got you. I knew I had the hook here. No, because it'll introduce more competition into the
Right.
market. And what that means looks like to me is that the markets are going to become more competitive. If there's more competition in the markets, then it means that like some of these lazy strategy and branding tactics have to go away. And the understanding of who the customer is and why they're picking you is going to become so much more important. So that's exciting because that has not been the case. We've over the last 30 or 40 years, we've seen there less and less competition. So if the U.S. government's successful in some of these antitrust enforcement issues, it'll introduce more competition. So that's one trend I hope to see. The second thing is I think we're going to continue to see people work, more with people all over the globe. Right. There's going to be access to knowledge and skills and markets is going to be greater. But again, that's a competition thing. And so then understanding who the customer is and why they're going to pick you and being competitive in those markets, that's another thing that we're going to be seeing. And then the third thing that I think at least I'm predicting we will see is that we will see there'll just be hopefully a much more vibrant market for small and medium-sized businesses. So I'm hoping that we'll start to see more people start small and mid-sized businesses again. And I think it's all tied together because there's more competition. There's more opportunity for people. So to me, I know it's going to be a rough. I think it'll be a rough period for the next couple years, but if people can get those basics right, like what does success look like? Who's the customer? Why are they picking me? I think on the other side, there's going to be a lot more competition and that muscle, right? Because like the strategy and being able to think strategically is a muscle is going to serve you very well because I think that the future is going to hold a lot more room for competition. and a lot more room for people to start and grow their businesses due to that competition. So I'm not a
Right.
pessimist by any stretch of the imagination, even though like it sometimes
Not at
can be like
all.
going, it can be like, oh man, this things seem a little tough right now. But I am an optimist, so
You're
if
an
you want the
optimist, you're the
pessimist, you got
realist.
the wrong guy.
No. No, it's great you highlighted that the future is full of opportunities for those
Yeah.
who are prepared to embrace change and continue learning. And with
Hmm.
that, Dave, we conclude this episode. Thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights and expertise with us today. It's been an enlightening discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners have gained a wealth of knowledge from your perspective today. So thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
That brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. A huge thank you to Dave Wakeman for sharing his vast experience and wisdom with us. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to our partners who make this show possible. A big shout out to our exclusive banking partner, RBC, for their unwavering support. We're also grateful to UPS, our exclusive shipping partner, ensuring our logistics runs seamlessly. And of course, a huge thanks to Zero, our exclusive accounting software partner, helping businesses and individuals manage their finances with ease. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share with your network. We'll be back soon with more enlightening discussions. Until then, keep innovating and stay ahead of the curve.